Hello again, I am Blunty. Now, in the video immediately previous to this one, we looked at the Sony Ericsson Xperia Play as a gaming device, and I came out of the video saying, hell yes, as a gaming device, alright! But the reason you're watching this video is to figure out the other 50% of that equation of whether this device is worth spending your money on, whether it's worth owning, what it's going to be like to live with, and that is how it performs as a regular phone, as a regular smartphone, as an Android device. Because let's be honest, if it's a shitty phone but an excellent gaming device, it's not going to be a hell of a lot of use to you. So let's not dilly-dally any further and get right down to the review. What is the Android Xperia Play like to use as a phone? Dilly-dally? Sorry. On the hardware side of things, it's a pretty standard looking handset with a predictable layout of buttons and connectors, no shocks here, and it has a combined data and charging port of a standard micro USB port, so that makes life easy. And I covered the slide out gamepad in the first part of this review, so no need to go over that again. The 4-inch screen is pretty decent, but not eye-explodingly pretty or as bright or as crisp as its stablemate the Xperia Arc, but I never had any trouble reading it in any lighting conditions, even in the sun. The basic gingerbread Android experience is pleasant and smooth, and with Sony Ericsson's own tweaks in place, it's quite a pleasing user experience for all the standard tasks like email, texting, phone calls, and all that kind of garbage. The inbuilt speakers are pretty good too, giving a good volume for music and games, and the touchscreen was always nicely responsive. The Android Market app is the same experience you'll get on any gingerbread handset really, but because of the Xperia Play's gaming focus, you've also got the ability to load up a customized marketplace which filters out everything except the games that have been specifically enhanced for the handset's gaming controller. There's also the PlayStation Pocket app through which you can buy the PlayStation games from. Unfortunately, as this device hasn't actually launched in Aussie land just yet, the Sony folks haven't hit the switch to turn it on here at the time of filming, and I didn't have access to the other PlayStation titles that are sitting there waiting. But the point is, both these specialty markets will make it much easier and faster to get the apps and games specifically enhanced for the Play. But unlike some other specialty devices with their own special little mini markets, you've still got access to the entirety of the standard Android market too. Sadly, for all the sweet little tweaks the Sony folk have made, the Play still features the bog standard Android camera interface, which shit me, quite honestly, because the custom one they made for the Arc was awesome. Why can't I have that on this handset too? The default Android camera app is offensively shitty, to be frank, and we all know it. Sadly too, the Play doesn't share the fantastic Exmor-R image sensor of its big brother device, the Arc. Instead, it's sporting an unambitious 5.1 megapixel shooter on the back and a very ordinary VGA camera on the front for video calls. But while I did just use the word unambitious for the main rear-facing snapper, that doesn't mean it's crappy, it's just unambitious. It actually takes pretty decent shots, nothing I'd be printing out onto big canvas things to hang on my wall, but it's quite serviceable. The colours are nicely saturated, it does a pretty good job at correct exposure with decent dynamic range too. And it actually does a rather pleasing job at macro shots, picking up detail and tone very nicely, and the background drops into a reasonably pleasant blur. In low light, without the assistance of its onboard LED flash, it does okay, but not quite as well as the iPhone 4. The white balance, however, is more accurate and natural than the iPhone 4, and the detail in the roof is much nicer on the Play. But as you can see, it's not quite as good in picking up the detail from the deeper shadows. When you blow up the shots to 100% size, you can see the detail is a bit soft and there's some image noise in there, even with the sunlight through a window, but to be fair, those issues aren't remotely unusual for a camera phone. Most of them do exactly that. And let's face it, these days camera phones are used far more for snapping a shot, throwing it into an app, tweaking it and throwing it at Twitter anyway. And while the camera wasn't especially inspiring for a photo nerd like me, it'll certainly be more than good enough for most folks who aren't quite as anal as me when it comes to photography. Switching across to the video mode, you get a selection of quality settings, but don't use them. Anything but the highest setting will make you want to pluck out your own eyeballs with a small unwashed teaspoon. In video mode, like the stills mode, it's unremarkable. It looks pretty much exactly how you expect a standard camera phone video to look. Sadly though, it's not even capable of 720p, as most handsets these days are doing. Instead, you'll max out at 800 by 480, which again is squarely in the backyard of okay for YouTube, But frankly, it's astonishing that Sony Ericsson let this one loose unable to accomplish even 720p, especially when the other Xperia models that share the same CPU and other internals, like the Arc, do 720p without breaking a sweat. And in low light, unsurprisingly, its video mode, like its stills mode, can't quite keep up with the iPhone 4. Like almost every camera phone, you'll get some wobblies in rapid sideways pans too. Pretty much all cameras with a CMOS-based image sensor will do this. It's called the rolling shutter effect. Some cameras suffer more than others, but in this case it's pretty middle of the road. What it does do quite well though is rapidly and fairly smoothly adjust for changes in exposure. Watch the foreground as soon as this tram goes by. Boom, very fast, very smooth readjustment. I like that. Chances are you've picked up on a pattern by now, and you won't be surprised to hear me say the audio recording too is pretty standard fare. Not awful, but not great. Serviceable is probably the best word for it. The onboard default web browser is the same one the Arc uses, and as I stated in the review of that device, it's pretty nice. It's reasonably quick, very smooth and responsive. It does all the stuff you want a browser to do relatively painlessly, including playing back YouTube videos, both embedded and full screen, without any stuttering. Oh, and of course it does that neat little trick of reflowing the text when you zoom right in to make it easier to read without having to scroll around. I like that too. The overall experience of using Sony Ericsson's tweaked Gingerbread Android on the Play was smooth and generally pleasant. It rarely got bogged down or stuttery and never crashed or hung on me. You don't get much internal storage, but it does come with an 8GB microSD card in the box, which of course you can easily switch out for a much larger memory card if you need to. Battery life was pretty good. Like the Arc, it never failed to get me through a day, even with constant twittering and various gameplay sessions throughout the day. The battery life, like the camera I guess, won't blow you away, but it should be quite sufficient for all but the most demanding of users. Overall, it's a very capable Android handset. It's not the fastest, it's not the brightest, it's not the lightest, and it's not the fanciest, but it is still a very nice Android experience. And that, combined with the absolute joy that it brings to the table with its gaming pedigree, makes it a very interesting device indeed. Alright, so there you go. Hopefully that is all the information you need to make an informed decision about whether the Xperia Play is for you or not. For me, yeah, I'm going to be picking one up. The experience is just too good. It's a brilliant Android device, and I like to have a secondary Android device lying around. My main phone is an iPhone 4, of course, because it's got that brilliant camera and everything, and, you know, I love it to bits. But I like having an Android device around as a backup, as a secondary device, as something to look at Android-specific apps and things like that on. And because it's such a good Android device, it's a no-brainer there. But the gaming experience on it is so fantastic and so joyous, and you know, I made sure to save the memory card, so all my settings and all the stuff I had installed and all the stuff I was playing with is sitting in a little folder on my computer, so when I buy my own I can just dump it straight across to the memory card on the new device, on my own device, and keep going from where I left off, because it was a pretty sad day when I had to send it back. I've got to be honest, I missed the damn thing. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.